There's something about lights in the dark that stirs the imagination. In the distance, just out of reach, they flicker. Soft, eerie, like something alive. For centuries, people have seen these ghostly glimmers and wondered what they mean. Do they signal danger, or are they simply leading you to it? Welcome to Podcast Folklore, and today we explore the spectral lights that have haunted the edges of the night for centuries. Corpse candles, willow wisps, and the eerie glowing orbs that have been spotted in some of the most desolate places on Earth. Before we get started, if you love folklore, myths and legends, then please consider subscribing and leaving this video a like. From the windswept hills of Wales to the marshes of England and across the world, the salt flats of India and the mangroves of Bengal, these lights have captivated and terrified those who've seen them. Their stories are strange, unsettling, and sometimes tragic. In the Welsh countryside, where the mist clings to the hills and the nights stretch long and quiet, there's a belief, one that's persisted for centuries. If you see a faint flickering light hovering near the ground, it's not something to follow. They call it a corpse candle. And it's a sign that death is near. Not just death in general, but your death, or the death of someone close by. These lights don't burn brightly. They aren't beacons of hope, like a lighthouse guiding ships safely to shore. No, these lights are colder, more reserved, casting you just enough glow to make you wonder if you've truly seen them at all. They appear without warning, hovering low near graves, homes of the dying, or lonely, deserted paths, places where you wouldn't expect life, or perhaps where life is already fading. In Welsh tradition, the corpse candle is no mere coincidence, is a herald of what's to come, guiding an invisible procession through the dark. But not just any procession. This is the final journey, one that leads from life into death. The Welsh believe these lights signal the route that a funeral will follow soon. And if you happen to cross the path of that glowing orb, the boundary between life and death suddenly feels much thinner. The stories of these lights stretch back generations, passed down like whispered secrets between families. In some versions of the legend, the size of the flame matters. A small, dim light means the death of a child, while a larger, brighter flame indicates passing of an adult. Imagine seeing a faint light in the distance and wondering, who is it for? Is it for a neighbour or a family member? Or is it for you? There's a chilling anecdote told in the village of Clannydoes, a quiet, unassuming town in mid-Wales. One night long ago, a villager was walking alone along a misty path. He saw a flicker of light up ahead. Curious, he stepped closer, watching as the light drifted slowly towards a nearby churchyard. It danced in the air for a moment, hovering above the gravestones, before disappearing into the night. Days later, news spread of the death of a local man, and when the funeral procession made its way to the churchyard, it followed the exact path the light had been 2 days before. The light, it seems, had been mapping out the way for the departed. These corpse candles aren't just local folklore though, they are woven into the very fabric of Welsh culture, a deeply spiritual society where life and death exist in close proximity. And it's not hard to see why such a belief might take hold. In a land where the fog rolls in thick and fast, and the nights are so still that even the smallest light can cut through the dark, it's easy to imagine that not all things that shine are of this world. But why do these lights appear? And more importantly, what are they? Some say they are the souls of the dead themselves, wandering between the world and the next. Others believe their spirits sent to guide the newly departed to their resting place. It's not uncommon in Welsh belief for spirits to linger, restless souls who can't quite move on. The corpse candles then could be part of this liminal space, a sign that the veil between the world is thin and that something or someone is about to cross over. There's even a practical element to these beliefs. In the days before modern medicine, death often came without warning, and the concept of an unseen illness was difficult to grasp. A sudden death might seem more understandable if there were signs. Corpse candles that foretold it in a time where communities were tightly knit, the appearance of these lights might serve as a subtle social warning. A light near a house could indicate sickness inside, a hint to the neighbours that something was wrong, even if no one had said it out loud. Of course, the rational mind tries to explain away these things. Scientists have long suggested that what people see as corpse candles could be nothing more than marsh gas, released from decaying organic matter, igniting when they come into contact with the air. In the cold, damp valleys of Wales, such gases are common, especially near the wetlands, where many of these lights are said to appear. But science doesn't account for the timing, does it? It doesn't explain why these lights seem to appear right before death, or why they often follow the path of a funeral procession. It's easy to say these things are a coincidence, but if you've grown up in a village where your grandparents and their parents had seen these lights, and those lights had always meant death was near, would you still believe it was just a gas? Or would you look a little closer and a little harder and wonder, what if it might be something else? And then there's the silence. Those who've seen the corpse candles say the world around them goes quiet, as if even the earth itself knows to hold its breath. The sound of birds stop, the wind stills, and for a brief moment, the only thing that exists is the flickering light, and the overwhelming sense that something is coming. There's a weight in that silence, a knowing that hangs in the air, and when it passes, the world feels just a little bit darker. In some stories, the candle just hovers. In some, it follows. It drifts slowly behind the person who sees it, as if waiting for them to turn around, and when they do, the light flares brightly before vanishing into the night. What does it mean when the candle follows you? Well, according to the legend, it's not just someone else's death being foretold anymore. It's yours. The light has marked you, and sooner or later the path it traces will be yours to walk. There's a darker legend that comes from Ireland. It's not as well known as some of the more famous ghost stories, but it's a far more unsettling one. It's called the fetch light. In Irish folklore, the word fetch refers to something strange and eerie, a doppelganger of sorts. But unlike the doppelganger of European legend, a fetch isn't just a physical double. It's a supernatural hairbringer, a spectral twin that appears as a warning, a shadowy version of yourself or someone you know. And if you see it, it only means one thing: death is near. Not for a stranger, but for the person it resembles. The fetch light, then, is its glowing counterpart, less of a doppelganger and more of a spectral signal. If you see a faint flickering light in the distance, hovering outside your window or trailing along a dark road, it might be leading you somewhere, but the question is where? In Ireland, it was never the light you wanted to see, because while it might seem to offer guidance, the truth is far darker. The fetch light wasn't showing you the path to safety, but rather a path towards your own end. The light itself was a warning, but not one you could avoid. The best you could hope for was to understand what it meant, that something inevitable, something final, was drawing near. The fetch light wasn't just another ghost story to scare children, it was woven into the Irish understanding of life and death, a culture where folklore and fate were intimately entwined. In a land shaped by harsh weather and hard living, where death could come suddenly, whether from illness, famine or war, the fetch light served as both a comfort and a curse. It was a knowing, a brief flickering glimpse of what was to come, and in a way it gave people time to prepare. Though how much comfort that could really bring is another question in itself. There's an old Irish belief that the fetch light often appeared right before the death of someone close to you. Not in broad daylight, of course. These lights were creatures of the dark. They flickered at dusk in the quiet moments just before the world went still. And when they appeared, they did so silently, hovering just outside the window or in the distance beyond your home, as if they were watching, waiting for the right moment, not for drama or spectacle, but for the soul itself. In many stories, the fetch light had an unsettling patience. It didn't rush, didn't demand attention, like the will-o'-the-wisp. It simply lingered. Some say it would appear only a day or two before someone's passing, giving those who saw it just enough time to recognise the coming tragedy, but not enough time to do anything about it. You couldn't banish the light, nor could you follow it. All you could do was watch and wait. Imagine sitting by a dying relative's bedside, knowing that any moment their spirit might slip away. The room is silent except for their laboured breathing, the air heavy with the weight of the impending loss. You get up, go to the window, perhaps for a breath of fresh air, and there it is, a light. Small, flickering, barely noticeable, hovering in the distance. You blink, rub your eyes, but it doesn't disappear. The fetch light has come. You know that the time is near, not because your doctor told you, but because the light did. The fetch light shares something in common with the banshee, another infamous figure in Irish folklore. But while the banshee's wail was loud and unmistakable, the fetch light was quiet. The two legends are related in a way. Both serve as warnings of death, both give people a chance to face the inevitable. Yet where the banshee screams, the fetch light whispers. It glows softly in the night, a subtle but chilling presence letting you know that the death is not far behind. The fetch light also has an unsettling connection with another Irish belief, the death knock. If you hear a knock on your door or window in the dead of night, especially 3 distinct taps, it's said to foretell the death in the household. The fetch light was often seen near those same doors and windows as if it was part of the same ritual, quietly signalling that the time had come. The light was in a way a visible counterpart to the ghostly knock. But why would a fetch light appear? What exactly was it? Some believed it wasn't a spirit or a ghost in a traditional sense, but a fragment of a soul, a part of the person who was about to die, breaking away before their time had come. It was as if their spirit was testing the waters of the afterlife, sending out a flicker of light to scout ahead. The fetch light was neither malevolent nor kind. It was simply a fact of death, a reminder that the boundary between the living and the dead was never as far as we'd like to believe. It's also worth noting that the fetch light wasn't confined to Ireland alone. The Scottish have their own version of this phenomenon. It came in the name of a spirit candle. Much like the Welsh corpse candle or the Irish fetch light, the spirit candle was said to guide the souls of the dead, flickering along the roads they would soon travel. These lights, though culturally distinct, all share a common theme. Death is not hidden in the shadows. It walks with us, sometimes even lighting the way. And yet, for all its chilling presence, the fetch light has also provided something that many feared more than death itself: certainty. In a world where death often comes suddenly and without explanation, the fetch light was a signal, a clear, unmistakable sign. It gave people time to say their goodbyes, to put their affairs in order. There was, in its way, a kind of mercy in the light's flicker. It didn't come with violence or pain. It simply illuminated the inevitable. But even with the flicker of understanding, there's something deeply unsettling about knowing your fate. about seeing the end before it arrives. Most of us live our lives not thinking about the end, or at least pretending that we don't. The fetch light doesn't give you that luxury. It shows you the path you're on, and it's a path with only one direction. This isn't the only tale of the corpse candle, of course, and its associates. They've been spotted throughout other parts of Wales too, always as a forewarning. Sometimes they appear near graveyards, a place already steeped in history, in centuries of death. A man walking past one evening saw a light drifting towards the graves. It seemed almost purposeful. Days later, the funeral of an elderly woman followed the same path, her spirit perhaps already guided by that ghostly flame. There's also in England the O Wisps, mischievous trickster lights playing with the minds of the living. These ghostly flames flickered over the marshes and swamps, luring travellers off the safe paths and into danger. There's something uniquely cruel about the O Wisp. Unlike the corpse candle, which at least is a warning of what's to come, these lights are playful, almost mocking. The story goes that they'd just appear when a traveller was lost, flickering in a distance, like a guide, promising safety, but never delivering. No matter how far you walked towards it, the light always stayed just ahead, and soon enough you were hopelessly lost, wandering deeper into the marsh where the ground beneath you would start to give away. In some places they say these lights are spirits of the dead, trying to guide others to join them. In others they're seen as malicious trickster beings, perhaps even the devil himself, playing one last game with the lost souls of the living. It's not just Europe where these lights appear. In the salt flats of India, there's a phenomenon known as chirbati, or ghost lights. They hover over the barren landscape, glowing blue or red, always just out of reach. Local villagers say these lights are the spirits of the dead wandering the earth, lost and searching. Like their European counterparts, they lure people away from safety, leading them deeper into the desolation of the salt flats. Many have tried to follow these lights, only to find themselves lost with no way back. Scientists, of course, have tried to explain the phenomena away. They say the lights are nothing more than gases released from the ground. It's plausible, and it's an explanation one rooted in science, but it doesn't account for everything. And then there's Japan, a land where folklore and spirituality entwine in ways that feel as old as the mountains and as transient as the mist that rises from them. Here the ghostly lights we've been speaking about take on another form, delicate flickering orbs. In Japanese folklore, they are believed to be souls of the recently deceased, wandering through the night on their way to the afterlife. Unlike the eerie glow of corpse candles or the mischievous flicker of O Wisps, they are gentler in appearance. They are soft, small lights, blue or green, drifting silently through the darkness, like fireflies lost in the void. They're often near sacred spaces, temples, forests or graveyards, places where the barrier between the living and the dead is already thin. They don't lead you astray or mark your fate like the lights of other cultures. They just simply are. They're a reminder that the soul has recently left this world and is on its way to the next. In Japan, death is not feared in the same way it might be in the West. It's seen as a part of the natural cycle, a transition rather than an end. The hitodama then are not ominous, they're not warnings. They are, in a sense, peaceful. When someone dies, their soul is believed to detach from the body, taking the form of a glowing ball of energy. It rises, floating through the night, before it finally reaches its destination, wherever that may be. There's a certain calmness to this belief, and kind of an acceptance. When the Japanese see these lights, it's not a cause for panic or dread. It's simply a recognition that the cycle of life and death is always turning. That the spirit is on its rightful journey, and in a way, it provides closure. They are the final visible sign that someone has passed, visible proof that the soul has left the physical realm and it's making its way beyond. There's a famous tale from Kyoto, a city steeped in ancient tradition. In the stillness of a summer night, locals often reported seeing hitodama drifting lazily through the grounds of old temples. It's said that the souls of the monks who once lived and meditated there still make their presence known. They float, quiet and unassuming, above the temple grounds, their soft blue light illuminating the ancient stones and overground paths. For those who see them, it's not frightening, it's a sign of the deep spiritual connection that still permeates these sacred spaces. In some places, people say that seeing them is a horror, a fleeting moment where the living and dead cross paths without fear or malice. It's as if for a brief moment the fabric of reality has thinned and we're given a glimpse of something that lies just beyond our understanding. But like all such lights, there's a deeper truth hidden beneath the glow. A reminder that the boundary between life and death is far thinner than we'd like. It's easy to believe that death is something distant, something that happens to others in faraway places. But when you see a hitodama glowing faintly in the dark, you're reminded that death is always near, a constant companion on the journey of life. It's not something to fear exactly, it's more of a recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that even as we go about our lives, there are forces at play that we can't control, can't fully understand. And sometimes those forces glow softly in the dark, like a soul has briefly returned to the world of the living. The lights that flicker at the edges of our vision remind us that there's much in the world that we don't understand. They appear dancing in the distance, tempting us, wanting us to follow. And maybe, just maybe, we should resist that temptation. Because some mysteries, as fascinating as they are better left in the dark. I'm Kaylee, and this has been Podcast Folklore. Until next time, keep an eye on the horizon, but don't follow everything you see. And as always, continue to explore the world with wonder.